Hello and welcome to our podcast, Business Law Pro. My name is Anna Topowski and I'm a Miami business attorney, joined by my co-host, Kendra Jones, who's a compliance and regulatory specialist. On our podcast, we discuss latest regulatory and latest legal updates in the field of international business and technology. We talk about data privacy a lot, AI stuff, news developments, what's happening, what are the new trends, what you should watch out for, what you should know as a business owner or person who works in the technology field. So, without further ado, Kendra, what are the latest and greatest news for this episode?
Google Analytics has been fined, I think, in Ireland? I want to say, I hope that's right. Anyways, basically, they're saying, the Irish authorities are saying that it violates GDPR and that it's sending data back to the United States in, contravention of the GDPR regulations.
For those of you who don't know, GDPR is a British law that basically is there in place to make sure that the data is not scraped by large companies or smaller companies and then being sold for unknown purposes. Now, GDPR has a lot of limitations, and it also requires a company to have special privacy data officer and provide that officer's information in their privacy policy outline. Privacy policy. But if actually Google Analytics has violated GDPR, there's just an ample opportunities for other companies, smaller companies, to do that, and not an opportunity in a good way, but something that we all should be concerned about. What were the limitations in this case? What did they state? What were the major concerns? Was it just the transfer of the of data?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the transfer of the data from the European countries to the U.S. So that's part of it. It's like how you can use the data that you collect. You have to be transparent about what you're going to be using the data for. And yeah, they found that it was
Google
Analytics was violating that GDPR.
Yeah, you have to be very careful with your privacy policy, and if you have any questions about privacy policy, we are actually experts in working with privacy policy and making sure that your business is in compliance with the latest regulations, whether or not it's GDPR, whether or not it's California Privacy Act, and many other laws that are now in place in different states that talk about privacy policy and data transfers and data safety, so to speak. I'd like to...
Let's talk about the Illinois case then.
Let's
and then
do that.
We'll come back for the other one. So Illinois, like Anna was saying, the states have lots of different laws. There's no uniform law across this country, at least, for how data is used. So there's about 10 states so far, I think 10 or 11 states that have some version of a data privacy law, but they're all going to be different. So Illinois has this very strict biometric data regulations and how they can use their employees' biometric data. And we have two companies now that have fallen, prey to these regulations.
Not realizing that they are violating. One of them was Whole Foods.
Yep, Whole Foods. They're collecting employees' voices because I think it was Amazon and Whole Foods. Yeah. The employees were using a headset, and so they were speaking in and being spoken to, but they weren't clear about what they were going to be doing with the employees' voices after, collecting it. And this trucking company in Illinois, they're using fingerprints.
Oh.
So a lot of these companies have fingerprints. Instead of you badging in, you put your fingerprint on there, and it's like you have to tell people what you are doing with their data. Like, that is a big part of the privacy policy, is not just to say what you're collecting, but what you're doing with the data and how you intend to dispose of it after all is said and done. So in Illinois, it seems like they have a pretty strict regulations around this. So, this is something you have to consider if you're doing business in Illinois, or if you think your business may touch Illinois in any way. And the same is true for all the other states that
exactly,
have
because
policies.
You have to understand that in the United States, privacy law is not uniform across all of the states. Each state has its own state privacy law, which you have to comply with whether or not you're transacting business. But I like Illinois law. Imagine you submit your fingerprints to your employer, and one thing is your government has your fingerprints, but some private companies have fingerprints. What are they going to do with that information, right? One thing is for safety concerns, but another thing is where it's going to end up. A lot of concerns, a lot of issues, a lot of things to think about.
Yeah.
But most certainly, as a business owner, you have to make sure if you are engaged in interstate commerce, most certainly you need to know all those differences.
And that's the thing, too. I mean, interstate commerce is very different now than it used to be. All of these businesses on Instagram, it's like you might think that you don't need anything specific to certain, states, but you may actually need to be in compliance with all of them if your business reaches across state borders, which most businesses do at this point.
Do these days, exactly. With online businesses growing so fast, it basically can be your business might be influencing a business somewhere overseas, and let's talk about one company, big company, that's just gotten in trouble, and not for data privacy, although they have gotten in trouble with others for data privacy violations as well, and that is Microsoft.
Yes.
On April 6th of 2023, Microsoft settled a case with Office of Foreign Asset Control, which is usually known as OFAC, and I think they had over 1,300 violations of various sanctions programs in countries like Cuba, Iran, Ukraine, Russia. How did they get in trouble? Microsoft has a fairly good legal team, I would imagine. Well,
I should hope so.
Well, the reason why they got in trouble was because they were having their product promotions and they were selling bulk licenses of their programs, which I guess didn't allow them to do fully their KYC checks, which is know your customer checks, which is what a business that is involved in the international commerce needs to be doing these days. Even though you might not be a US-based business, even though Microsoft was trading through its various subsidiaries and various vendors, right, they were still using third parties to sort of not fully check how their program, how their products will, where their products will end up. So my understanding was that they were selling those bulk product programs, and that eventually led to a number of violations, and they ended up settling this. But it raises a bigger issue, right? What is the obligation right now of an international business in terms of latest sanctions developments? And as a business attorney, I represent some of the sanctioned companies, and it's work that I do because a lot of it is very vague. OFAC does not need clear and convincing evidence. It might be an article that comes out that gives them reasonable belief as the standard, I believe, that they use to find sanctions violations, right? And especially if you're a US-based company and if you are involved in any kind of import and export, if you're a US company that's, selling its product overseas, you might want to check with us and make sure that you are following your KYC policies and standards.
Absolutely.
And you can do that by subscribing to our newsletter on businesslawpro.com, as well as subscribing to a YouTube channel for Business Law Pro and following our podcasts. Well, thank you for joining us for our podcast. Thank you for watching us, for liking us. Please comment on our podcast and our various channels on Instagram and YouTube. We'd really appreciate it, and we want to hear your feedback. We'd like to know what is it that you're interested in and want to learn more about. This podcast is brought to you by TopNotchStudios.com. We think this team of professionals that are really great at doing their job. And we hope to see everybody soon. Bye.